So now let's jump into discovering your personality type. So now we're going to get to talk about one of my favorite topics, personality. Now, my absolute favorite personality assessment is the one we're going to be working with, which is the Myers-Briggs or MBTI. And it's also the most popular and commonly used psychological assessment that helps you evaluate your personality. It's been studied for years and years and years, and so there's a lot of data to back up the fact that it's pretty accurate. And actually, it's used very often in a business setting where they analyze the personality profiles of the people who work in a certain working environment together to make sure that they put people in the right positions and they team them up properly. So it's a very powerful tool, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. So the reason why we're including personality in a program about purpose is because research has found that certain personality types are highly satisfied in life when they do certain things in their lives, especially related to career. So what I'm going to be talking about is sort of directed at those of you who might be looking to fulfill your purpose, but also maybe through a career, and how you could use your understanding of your personality type in order to do that. But at the same time, the insights that you can gain from your personality type and what will feed you and make you feel fulfilled in life is also going to apply to every aspect of your life, not just what you do to make a living. So in the worksheets, we have a personality quest quiz that you can take to identify your MBTI personality type. Now, this is not the full-length questionnaire, although it is a commonly used version. So if you really, really want to dive deeper into your personality type, you can go online and you can do the official Myers-Briggs personality type inventory. And there is a small fee for that, but usually this version gets you there and gives you enough information about the different personality types where you can read the descriptions to really determine if you got the right one and which one's the best fit for you. So there are 4 dimensions that make up personality, and the different combinations create those 16 types that are part of the MBTI. Now, in each dimension, you're going to be choosing between 2 options, and sometimes it can be hard to choose. So while I go over the different options, I'm going to point out where it's common that people get stuck, and if this happens to you, how you can decide which side you fall on. So the first one is extrovert versus introvert. Now, the first thing I have to do is to address a misunderstanding that a lot of people have, and that's that extroverts are very talkative and outgoing and introverts are quiet, because there's a lot more to it than that. I myself do a lot of public speaking. I'm very chatty and talkative. I'm around people a lot, and a lot of people assume I'm an extrovert, but I'm actually not. I'm actually very introverted. So it can kind of throw you off if that was your understanding. So just eliminate that assumption and start with a blank slate with your perspective of what these terms mean, and let's look at it in a little bit more detail of what it actually is. So really what it comes down to is this: where do you naturally direct your attention, and where do you get your energy from? So for example, extroverts tend to naturally be drawn to the outer world. And they also receive energy from being around other people, from being active. And that's how they recharge their batteries. So for instance, if they were feeling down, they would tend to go out someplace that's social. Their attention is very focused on the outer world. They notice what's going on around them. They tend to have a lot of people around them a lot of the time. Now, in contrast, an introvert pays more attention to their inner world. Their attention is naturally inside. So when they're out and about, they're more likely to notice what's going on in their own mind or body than they are to notice what's going on in the environment around them. And so it doesn't mean that they're completely oblivious to what's going on around them. It's just that they're a lot more likely to have their attention directed internally. They often tend to have a lot of mental activity, often more so than physical activity. Now again, it doesn't mean they don't like physical activity. It's just that their internal world is very active. They're a lot less likely to love being the center of attention or to love being in a social environment. But like I said, it doesn't mean they don't like it at all. They just don't absolutely love it. And sometimes maybe it exhausts them like it does to me. The biggest distinguishing factor is that when they need to recharge their batteries, they actually have to remove themselves from a social environment in order to refill their tank. They get drained when they're around too many people or for too long. And when they're feeling down, they retreat to solitude. So with all of this, when you do the assessment, you're going to find that in some ways you are this thing and in some ways you are that thing. Nobody's ever really just 100% one or the other. So really, it's kind of like, which one do you lean towards more? And especially if you're older, you might end up feeling a little bit more balanced because as we age, we tend to develop more of our other side. And so this can actually even happen even if you're not older, you could just be more mature. But it's also okay if you're completely one and not the other. Everybody is different. So the next comparison is whether you're a sensor or an intuitive. And again, there's a common misperception here. Intuitive does not mean that you hear spirits talking. That's not the type of intuitive that we're talking about. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but if that's your perception, then again, I ask you to start with a blank slate. So sensing versus intuitive is really about how do you take in information. So a sensor trusts their 5 senses and they look at the world that can be smelled and touched and tasted, and they really feel like by using their 5 senses, they can get a real grasp, a logical understanding of reality. They're very concrete and they tend to like facts. Whereas someone who is on the intuitive side, rather than looking at what's obvious, they tend to read between the lines. They don't necessarily trust their 5 senses to give them accurate information, and sometimes they even have a 6th sense. What they're really doing is looking for greater meaning. Instead of being very concrete, they tend to be very open to possibilities. Now, another signal that you might be an intuitive is you tend to speak in metaphors. So I'm intuitive and I speak in metaphors all the time, sometimes driving myself and other people crazy. So you'll see throughout this course that there's a lot of metaphors that we use to explain things, and that's because we lean towards the intuitive side. So the next comparison is thinker versus feeler. And it's actually the most common one for people to be unable to choose. So if you find yourself feeling like it's a tie in this area, then complete the last dimension and then look up the personality types for both of these options. So there's 4, and then if this one is like an undecided, look up both versions of yourself with this one being one way or the other. And then read them, and you might read one of them and go, oh yes, this one's definitely more like me. And so it can kind of be a tiebreaker. But part of the reason why it can be so hard to choose this one is that people will answer based on what they think they're supposed to answer, not based necessarily on who they are. Or maybe who they are has never been allowed to be developed. And this is because there's a really strong gender bias common in many cultures for men to be logical, which is the thinker, and for women to be emotional, which is the feeler. However, again, this is not what these words really mean. Thinking versus feeling is really about how do we make decisions. So if you tend to be very logical and you try to be very objective and you're analytical and you're looking at all the different facets of something in order to make a decision, then you're most likely a thinker. Now, a feeler, instead of saying these are the rules, they would be looking for the exception to the rule. They would be making a decision based on what felt right rather than what necessarily made the most sense logically. They often make decisions based on ethics, such as this is the nice thing to do. If you have a hard time deciding which one you are, ask yourself which one feels more natural, or even ask yourself which one would I want to be. And so the last dimension is judging versus perceiving. So here's what that means. Judging does not mean being judgmental, and perceiving does not mean being perceptive. It has a different meaning here. So people who are judgers, they prefer things to be orderly. They like structure. And a really good way to tell that you're a judger is that that you really want to have a decision made. You want to have everything resolved, and you absolutely can't stand it when something's left up in the air. Now, a perceiver likes to be spontaneous. They prefer to stay flexible rather than nailing themselves down to one thing and eliminating the other options. So they're kind of on the other extreme, where they tend to like to leave things open to possibilities rather than trying to resolve them. And perceivers tend to be less organized. Now, again, most people aren't strictly just one or the other. They're somewhere in between. But you're going to find that you tend to lean towards one more than you lean towards the other. So go ahead and take the assessment and then read the short descriptions about your personality type that you've identified. And you will know when you've identified the right one, because you're going to read it and you're going to think, wow, this really sounds like me. It's almost kind of creepy. But you might actually end up reading it and saying, this doesn't really feel right. And then you might want to go back and reassess your answers and see if you jumped to any conclusions of your answers based on what you thought you should answer versus who you really are. So once you've learned more about your own personality, you can use what you've learned in a couple of ways. First, after you complete this process, you can come back and look at your personality profile and see how everything that you discover throughout this greater process that we're working on fits in and matches your personality. And you can also use this personality type to do some additional research. If you search for your MBTI type online, you're going to find a lot of information that goes into greater detail about your personality. And again, this is especially helpful if you're wanting to have your career or your life's work be in alignment with your life purpose. So when I searched for my own type many years ago, which is an INFJ, by the way, for my career, I brought up all of these different websites and tools that had information. And it was extremely helpful while charting my own path for my career and my business and my life. And that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about it. And so there's actually a book that I used and I've recommended to like 1 million people called Do What You Are. And it's Myers-Briggs official product that helps you explore careers based on your type. And they actually have an updated version that addresses today's job market. So the one that I, read that's like 12 years old is a little outdated. So make sure you get the updated version. Now, one really fun thing that I recommend doing once you know your type is to read the profile of the opposite type. So I'm an INFJ. So I would read the ESTP, which is the exact opposite. And it's really fascinating to read how completely different they are. Now, this tool is also a powerful way to learn about other people in your life if you can convince them to take the quiz. So go ahead and take the quiz now and have fun with it and really keep your mind open to these insights that you gain about yourself so that you can put the pieces of the puzzle together and see how your life has unfolded in a way to give you an opportunity to really bring who you are and your personality out into the world.